this lecture, we will talk about markets and we will define how markets help the allocation of resources. Now, before we formally define what markets are, we need to remind ourselves that economics is about choice and how we use choices to weigh up the opportunity costs so that we can efficiently allocate resources so that our needs and wants can be maximized. So our needs and wants are maximized. Needs plus wants maximized. And it is under the market mechanism theory that if a market is perfect, then the market will maximize our needs and wants and minimize the opportunity cost. And by extension, this will lead to maximum living standards. Okay, now we've kept that in mind, we can define what a market is. So a market is basically an institution where buyers and sellers gather to negotiate prices for goods and services. Negotiate prices for G plus S. Let's just assume goods plus services. Okay, that's the formal definition of a market. But how does that help us allocate resources? Well, this comes down to the three fundamental questions of economics. So the functions of an economic system, which is, first of all, what and how much to produce, and second of all, how to produce, and third of all, for whom to produce. Now these are the three fundamental questions that we are about to answer. Okay, now keeping in mind that markets are an institution where buyers and sellers can negotiate prices for goods and services, and goods and services are what we need to maximize our living standard, we can answer these questions one by one. So let's look at the first question, for example. The first question relates to what and how to produce. So what and how to produce. And this relates to deciding the type and quantity of each particular good. So the type and quantity of production in an economy. And this involves how resources will be allocated or used in an economy, and this is determined by the market mechanism. So we have to assume that businesses also return back to the consumer sector. So what I mean by that is that every business has an owner, and every business owner is also a consumer by nature. So what that means is businesses seek to maximize their profit, and so they will respond to consumer changes onto what and how to produce their goods and services. And so decisions about resource allocation are largely left to the free operation of the market or price system. So when the price goes up, then obviously the profitability of that good or service will go up, so producers will allocate resources there. And so that's how the market system allocates resources in the free market operation. So how and what to produce. So resources are allocated to most profitable measure. Now let's look at the second question. The second economic question is how to produce these resources. This question refers to the method of production to be selected by firms and individuals for making each particular goods and service. So this is the method of production. Remember, firms need land, labor, and capital to produce goods and services, and in most cases, land, labor, and capital are very expensive. and they cut into profits. So what firms want to do is to minimize their costs. And when they minimize their costs, they can maximize profits and therefore maximize their own material living standards. And that's the type of question that the free market can help. And this could involve deciding what combination of labor and capital they use in production. So the combination of labor and capital. And this is helped determined by the labor market and the capital market, or the financial market, for instance. So let's note this down. So the labor market, labor plus capital plus financial markets help determine the price and the quantity of labor and capital that a firm should buy, so that they can produce at the lowest cost and the most efficient production methods possible. Okay, that was the second question. Now the third question relating to economic decision making and how markets help this is the question of for whom to produce. Now this may be a very straightforward answer, but sometimes it can be more complicated than it seems. So, for whom to produce? Assumably, we can see that businesses will tend to maximize profits, so therefore they will produce to the highest bidder. But this is only in a microeconomic sense. If we inject the government sector into this, then we can see that the government aims so that everyone's living standards in that country is maximized. So the living standards of the entire economy is maximized. And so the production should not be produced only for the highest bidder. But instead, the government tends to help share income or share the production between all of its residents. And here comes a question between efficiency and equity. And that's a question we'll talk about later. But for now, answering these three questions efficiently is perhaps the most important function of a nation's economic system. And although there are different types of economic systems around in the world, for example, in North Korea and Cuba, there's very much socialist systems, but for Australia, we live in a market economy. So in Australia, we live in a market economy. And it is the market that helps determine what to produce, how to produce, and for whom to produce our goods and services, so that the needs and wants not for just only a small population or small socio-economic group is maximized, but the living standards of the entire population is maximized. And that's how markets help allocate resources. And it's very important that we have markets in place, and most importantly, efficient markets in place, so that our needs and wants can be sufficiently met.